What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and as you probably know, Apple's released some new products, so we have to take a look. So sitting in front of me right here, I have the newly released iPad mini, as well as the new iPhone 13 Pro Max. And I'm not gonna really be doing a review necessarily because, well, there's plenty of other reviews that you could watch and probably have watched before this one, and there's not really that much to say, but we will take a look at some of the highlights of both of these products and talk about my first impressions using these for about 48 hours. But let's put the phone to the side. We'll take a look at that in just a second, but let's start with the newly released iPad mini. Now, if I'm being completely honest, this was the product I was more excited about than the iPhone. There's a couple things that I like about it, and we'll talk about that, but I was just more interested in getting a smaller form factor iPad because I've always loved the iPad mini, but the old one was just so outdated. But let's go ahead and just take a look at the form factor here. Now, I have already unboxed this, as you can tell, and I've got some shots here on screen so you can see that unboxing process. But, you know, pretty simple. It comes with the 20-watt charger in the box, the cable as well, and then the iPad mini itself. Now, I went with the space gray, but there are a couple other colors. You can get like a purple color, and there's a silver. I typically like to go with the kind of simpler colors and then put some interesting case on it, which is why I got this very bright orange little folio case here. I actually love the color, so I'm not mad about it. But yeah, this thing is basically all screen. Now, it's got some decent sized bezels to it, but that is actually not that bad because it does give you a place to put your fingers when you hold this, so you're not just gripping straight on the screen. So I'm not mad about that at all. And it's got the very kind of modern Apple look to it with the antenna bands all the way around the outside. Now, I don't know if that's just because I have a cellular model with 5G or if that is like that on all the models, including the Wi-Fi one. I did get the cellular, but this is just the 64 gig. I don't really see why you would need 256 gigs on an iPad. Mainly, I think for most people, iPads are like a media consumption device, maybe a little bit of web browsing, emails, and things like that, and you really don't need a lot of space for that. So 64 is perfectly fine for what I'm gonna use it for, which is media consumption, using it as a mini teleprompter when I do work stuff, and just having something that I can communicate with that's not my phone if I'm out and about outside the house. So this is gonna be kind of portable for me, and that's what I like about it. My iPad Pro, while I love it, is a little bit too big for me to just kind of bring around with me all the time. I don't even bring my laptop around all the time. I prefer to have something nice and small, so the iPad mini is perfect for that. A couple quick tech specs. This is an 8.3-inch liquid retina display, 2266 by 1488. 500 nits of peak brightness here. One of the things that's kind of a bummer is it is just a 60 hertz display versus my iPad Pro, which is a 120 hertz ProMotion display, and the iPhone 13 Pro Max here has the 120 ProMotion display as well. So this is my only device now that has just a normal 60 hertz display. It's not the biggest issue in the world for sure, but it is noticeable. However, since they are in this form factor now, I don't think it'll be too much of a stretch for them to add the 120 ProMotion display in future models. I don't think that would even take that long to implement. So maybe next year, the year after, something like that. So that'll be a welcome change for sure. Another kind of weird thing for me is just the spacing and how iPadOS looks on this device. There's a lot of extra padding around the sides. I don't know how well you can tell on camera. I'll try to have a close-up for you to see it, but there's, you know, the apps feel like they're almost like squished into the center of the device versus being like all the way kind of up to the edges. And there's no real setting to be able to change that. And it makes the screen feel smaller than it actually is because of the usable space not being, you know, fully utilized. So that's a little bit weird. And it's not like the dock at the bottom doesn't reach all the way out. It does. It's just like the apps on the home screen don't extend, and I don't know why. But that seems like something they could fix pretty easily with a software update, so I hope they do that. It's powered by the A15 Bionic chip, so it's a modern chip. It's very quick and responsive. I haven't had any problems so far. Again, this is not like a heavy lifter really for me, so it doesn't need to have the best possible chips, but that is a pretty powerful one for something that's this size. We've got a 12 megapixel camera on the back, f1.8 on that one. 12 megapixel front facing camera, that is an f2.4, but it does have the wide angle to it to where you can use center stage, where it will kind of, you know, use software to kind of track you around the screen, which is really cool to have. My only other weird little gripe with the iPad mini here is just the button placement. You guys have probably seen people talk about this, but It's a Touch ID, there's no Face ID, and the button is up at the top, right? So that's fine. You unlock it and kind of rest your finger on there to open it. But then the volume buttons are also up top here. So it's like kind of a weird, hard to get used to kind of thing instead of them being on the sides here. Also, if you hold it in landscape mode, then your wrist here is bumping up against the volume buttons and the power button constantly. So it is USB-C, which is fantastic. Now, this is the only thing left that isn't USB-C. I mean, come on, man. So those are kind of the tech specs of the iPad mini and kind of the things that bug me so far. But other than that, I have had a lot of fun using this. I'm a big fan so far. So we'll put that down for a sec and take a look at the 13 Pro Max here. Now, I always have to get kind of the weird color. Last year, I got the Pacific Blue 12 Pro Max, and this year I went with the updated Sierra Blue. It's kind of hard to tell on camera for sure, but it is like a nice, like cornflowery blue, maybe like a, blue-gray kind of color. It's really, really nice. It has these beautiful reflective edges, which look great the first time you look at them, and then you touch it and they never look good again. Definitely want at least a protector on those things, if not a full case like I always do. Now, as far as changes here for the 13 Pro Max, 20% smaller notch at the top. I think that's pretty noticeable. It looks significantly different than my iPhone 12 Pro Max here that I've got, and I'll have shots on screen so you can see them side by side. But I definitely noticed the notch, but I noticed that ProMotion display right away. So it can go from 120 hertz all the way down to 5 hertz. So depending on what you're doing, whether you're surfing the web, reading emails, it will throttle down the refresh rate to kind of be in line with whatever you're consuming. So it makes it nice and flexible and also helps significantly with battery life. Now that is another thing that is increased. You do have a little bit longer battery life. I think it went from like 20 hours to 28 hours or something like that of video watching. So we'll see how that plays out in real world tests. But you do have a bigger camera bump here for sure. That's something that was noticeable right off the bat, especially in the cases. You can see how much bigger the little camera cutout is than it is on the 12 Pro Max here. So it's a 12 megapixel camera system across the board. You've got your telephoto, your wide angle, and your ultra wide cameras. The telephoto is an f2.8. The wide is an f1.5 and the ultra wide is an f1.8 with 120 degree field of view. That is a lower aperture than it was last year, which was one of my biggest problems with the 12 Pro Max. Ultra wide, I almost never used it because it was super grainy. Anything less than like broad daylight, it got super grainy. So that hasn't been my experience so far with the 13 Pro Max here, so hopefully that continues. But also they added the macro mode for the ultra-wide camera that lets you get really up close and personal with subjects and get some really cool, unique photos, which I'll have a few of those on screen here. You also have Apple's ProRes. That codec hasn't actually been released yet. It's coming as a software update later on, and that will just allow you to get, as close to uncompressed video as possible, just to give you a much higher quality video. They also added a sensor shift, optical image stabilization here, so the actual sensor itself will kind of move inside of its housing. Also, they increased the focal length of the telephoto lens. It's now a 77mm equivalent. So that's gonna give you a little bit more natural shallow depth of field and a little bit more range when using that telephoto lens. So there's a couple other differences between the 12 Pro Max and the 13 Pro Max, but the ones that really stand out to me, having owned both of these phones now, definitely a chunky camera bump, even compared to the 12 Pro Max, which was already pretty significant. And I like both colors. I think I probably like Pacific Blue more on the 12 Pro Max, but Sierra Blue is not bad at all. And then obviously that 120 hertz refresh rate ProMotion display here on the 13 Pro Max is fantastic. Much better, in my opinion, than the 60 hertz display. And again, that little notch, that 20% difference in notch is quite noticeable, as you'll see here on screen when I've got them side by side here. And also, I think the brightness is definitely noticeable. I think you can tell the colors and the brightness are better on the 13 Pro Max versus the 12 Pro Max. It's not crazy significant, but I think it's definitely noticeable. Another obvious and notable difference is not necessarily specific to the 13 Pro Max, but it is running iOS 15. And I will be making a video, it'll be out very soon, probably shortly after you see this video, on my top 10 iOS 15 hidden features. So definitely subscribe so you don't miss that video. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Drop a like on the video if you loved it. Tell me in the comments down below, what do you think about the new iPad mini and the 13 Pro Max? Do you like the color? Do you like the iPad mini? Have you picked one up yet? Let's have a conversation down in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to be one of the first to see every single new video the second I hit publish. We'll see you in the next one.